George Bush doesn't care about black people. Aloha. With this video, I wanted to continue on the same kind of mindset of the last two videos and just add some more examples of what I was given before, and then tie it all in together on how it affects this style of approach, this style of analyzing our society, analyzing yourself, finding a deeper interpretation of yourself, asking deeper questions, how these scenarios are largely kept from there's a consciousness that exists to keep you from thinking critically. There's a consciousness that exists, a parasite, a being, of whatever you want to call it. Excuse me. There's some kind of destructive intelligence that thrives off of your destruction intelligently. There's an intelligence that exists that largely a lot of even these truther communities don't even give enough credit to it, which is what allows this system to go as far as it does. This is why when you bring up flat earth, one of the main questions is, well, they all can't be lying. How could they all be lying? It's just so big of a thing that people can't even comprehend it. So like in reference to the human story, people can understand like my approach in reference to the so-called flat earth community. The human story is largely so big to even comprehend that most people, even in the flat earth community or in other kind of different communities, don't even want to venture in that, because in a sense you have to be invited into unraveling the human story. It's an invite only, and what happens is that you're inviting yourself. You can only invite yourself to a party that you are equipped to go to, just like a dream. You're only going to be in a dream that you're equipped to go to. If you're not equipped to be in that dream, like a nightmare, you'll wake up right out of that. Just like anything that happens in your reality, if you're not equipped to handle it, you'll run away, and eventually it'll come back into your reality. This is how we train ourselves. This is how we expand our consciousness. This is how we learn and grow. But like I said, since there is some kind of destructive intelligence that exists at the expense of the people, the question is, what do we do about it? How are we going to do anything about it? And like I was saying in the last videos, the authority, the power, this is all based upon illusions. This is all smoke and mirrors. Everything that the system has created largely was created out of fear. When the military industrial complex is expanded every single year, it's expanded because they're marketing fear to you constantly. You're marketed fear even from NASA, with Neil deGrasse Tyson saying you're going to get hit by an asteroid, so we should develop some kind of laser to keep us from being extinct like the dinosaurs. How many mind control programs were in that one little chunk of paragraphs that Neil deGrasse Tyson spouts off every single day? Just in his presence, he's got his own radio show. Think of it like the satellite on the top of that building in the movie They Live. That's what Neil deGrasse Tyson represents, and he's just an individual antenna in a world of antennas of destructive intelligence that exists out there. So my question is, like, again, like, what do we do? Well, even the idea of what you do is part of this mind control program, because like the phrase goes, even the best offense is a good defense, or however, if the best defense is a good offense, or I think it's the best offense is a good defense. But the point is, the defense in reference to this story of maintaining a complacent, dormant, desensitized, and overstimulated mass population is to control the opposition, to have a controlled opposition out there, and to have people living in dreams within dreams. So dreams within dreams can be seen even more clearly with understanding people who label themselves, labels within labels. So somebody who works at Office Depot is, you know, one group, one label, and then you're the manager of that Office Depot or whatever. So these are these dreams within dreams. Just imagine if somebody wanted to work their entire life. They finally made it, and now they're the manager. Just imagine if somebody, if that, just for whatever reason, that was their only dream. Look at the ego that comes from that. Building your entire dreams up. First of all, the dream to do that, is it natural? Is it organic? Or is it largely more synthetic? Now, from the individual perspective, obviously you can say it's natural, it's organic, because it's happening naturally to the individual. But when you take into account like for example, the hormones that are being pumped into milk and all your food and your drinks, that affects you at certain ages, early ages, like even these vaccines, these hormones that are being pumped. We don't know exactly what's being pumped through these vaccines, but if they're pumping hormones through the food that you're eating, what the hell do you think that they're pumping into these kids at a very young age? So it affects you. It makes you think. It readjusts your interpretations of what natural actually is. So once you start questioning your reality from the foundation, those are the truths that stick the deepest into your reality. So your foundations are created, like the foundations are generated. The foundations of this society, the modern society, are generated by these so-called forefathers who had no moral ethics, period. They were just all about greed, power, and control. And for many reasons, most people act like this, doesn't exist. It's kind of like how some people think that white supremacists just disappeared. They don't exist anymore. Well, look again. They're everywhere. Just because the Civil Rights Act was passed doesn't mean anything really, but it sure as hell doesn't mean that white supremacy and racism just disappeared. No, they put on different suits. They put on different faces, and they interact differently, and it's gotten more intricate and more complex. That program is not anything to be just pushed to the side and not analyzed. It's a very, very, very deep structure to take an individual, their culture, everything, and water it down to nothing. The term white is nothing. There is nothing there. Same with the term black. It's nothing there. You are inherently connecting to something that is nothing. And when you have people based upon the foundations of who they are, have nothing, largely they will bite onto anything that is placed in front of them. So here comes the New Age community, which is filled with a whole bunch of little tiny somethings that only act as stepping stones for you to get to a deeper something within yourself. You cannot step on external stepping stones for the rest of your life and just hope that the internal stepping stones will be taken care of. You can't step on external stepping stones and think that something is happening on the inside. These are only pathways to the doorway. It's you that has to walk through the door of whatever it is that you're choosing to experience. The experience might get you there. It'll get you to the door, but you have to walk through that door. And this is what all of these microcosm truths that I've been explaining are. We've we've been conditioned to think that this is why nothing actually gets done in society. It's all about just hoping for the future, and we're gonna go to Mars, we're gonna have flying cars, we're gonna, have this, we're gonna build a wall, we're gonna save the world from terrorism, or whatever other stories are out there. It's always existing. It's never, we're doing this right now. It's never this, it's never that. It's always projected into the future. And it's projected into the future because this system is not meant to actually do anything right now. Because in not doing anything for the people, you get more and more people vesting their energy and attention into the system of the so-called future. So you have people living in the future, people living in the past, and have no idea of what's going on in the present moment. You have an empty synthetic individual. You've literally destroyed every single, for example, meditative space that they can entertain, in the idea of, think of how it would feel to be able to meditate in the moment of your entire past, like all of your timelines, the storylines of the past, to have swam through all that information, as much information as you had, to not having any barriers or attachments or expectations or even emotional triggers. It's different from passion. It's different from compassion and passion. Emotion is different from compassion. Compassion is more deep. It's like love. How love is, you can't, it's not even a word. It's deeper than obviously the word. So the emotional triggering, just like the pathway to the door, is acting as you walking through that doorway, whereas compassion is actually walking through that doorway, actually doing that work, whatever that work is. But since we are largely, like I said, desensitized and overstimulated with our emotional body, so your relationships are all about the emotion. Your friendly connections are all about the emotion. Your sports, your food is sold to you with emotion. This is a very heavily emotionally triggering experience, both on the synthetic and the organic perspectives of this reality. And the system, or this parasite, or whatever this being, knows this. So we are being triggered by our own emotions, by our own natural identities, our own natural parts of this experience are being manipulated, triggered, cloned, for lack of a better word. Our natural, our organic realities are being cloned and sold back to us as the real thing. And before I get into the other ones, I'll give you these examples again of what I ran through in the last couple of videos. The ideas of these, or some of the lists of these synthetic versions of leaders and synthetic versions of truth, this normalization of chaos and emptiness, is largely brought to you by your idea of forward progress. Your forward progress is still within a box. It's within a bubble. It's when you get into a dream within a dream, you're no longer active within that dream anymore if you're unaware of the world that the dream is. So this is what's happening largely with the majority of people in and around this world. We're so locked into these emotional, and what happens is that these pathways lead you away from yourself. This is the thing. The pathways have in the smoke and mirrors reality, the pathways lead you through the smoke with these mirrors throwing you off your path. You see with your eyes and you feel a certain way, thinking that you're going to a certain location. But since the world itself is built up of smoke and mirrors, you're actually walking on a treadmill, or walking backwards, or walking off course of your own reality. That's what this jester magic is to fool the fools into following the fool as a leader. This is why you can have a fool as a president of the United States. You can have a fool as a millionaire. These fools that are promoted by these mainstream media and social media and so on and so forth. That's not a mistake. It's clearly on purpose in order to dumb down the idea of what humanity is. Like I said, it's about where you're coming from, your definitions. If your definitions of the essence of who and what you are and where you are, like the heliocentric model, if they're all built on emptiness, if they're built on chaos and nothing, then you will produce the fruits of that perspective will be empty, chaotic, nothing filled individuals, which is exactly what this parasite needs in order to live through these people. And the more and more people who are actively celebrating this world of emptiness, whether they know it or not, the more people who are actively celebrating it are actually giving more energy to their emptiness. So just imagine like an upside down world. In the neutral zone, you're just nothing. You haven't been there yet. You still have the potential to walk your path. But once you jump off of that fence and you get into this path of nothingness, this path of chaos, that's when you start channeling your energy into another world. You can see it as the upside down world for people who have seen like Stranger Things. I think that's, yeah, Stranger Things. So this is basically where we are right now when you have an entire world, an entire collective of people who don't know how to think. They never get into critically thinking at all and will just buy anything that's sold to them by somebody who makes any kind of sense. So this is pretty much, that's the introduction into the alchemy of the controlled opposition, controlling your consciousness to think, act, and feel a certain way. So all of these systems or groups or communities that I've listed off in the last couple of videos, plus what I'm going to share with you right now, they're all designed to suck you in to that world of the upside down and channel your energy into a system that's going to only add to more emptiness with having the facade of fullness. You're filling up, you're basically creating new dreams within dreams based upon your own perspective of the implanted dream. So the American dream is going to be perceived differently from people, from different people based upon their whatever, everything. So when we understand that, like I said, in reference to the marketing scheme of, you know, selling chips in the United States versus selling chips in Brazil, the marketing colors, the style, the language is going to be different. And excuse me, largely all of it boils down to the same thing. That food is going to kill you. It's only for profit, and there's no humanity in that interpretation at all. It's all about profit and greed before any kind of nature and humanity perspectives. This is the upside down world. This is why I say it's so important to focus on the lack of humanity in stories like unraveling heliocentrism and looking into a lot of the flat earth information that's in and around disassembling that program. All of these stories, you can link back to the human story if you've done that work. If you haven't done the work internally, you will have no other choice but to trap yourself within that storyline in order to fully clear and process that energy. You have to stay in that bubble before the next stepping stone, before the next path presents itself. You're the one that has to clear out all that smoke. You're the one that has to bump your head on all those mirrors before you finally figure out that you've been mind controlling yourself because something or somebody else has convinced you of that. No different than the Stockholm syndrome of eventually polar shifting your reality to loving your enslaver after you were kidnapped. You are now in the world of that kidnapper, and then now creating a relationship with that kidnapper, whereas you had an entire life before you were kidnapped, before that criminal installed that Stockholm syndrome. Right now, the majority of people across the earth are suffering from this Stockholm syndrome, having been kidnapped by the Western so-called civilization. And since the system knows this and is very intelligent and is aware that people are becoming aware of this perspective, it has to install more programs to keep us from critically thinking. So what's the best way to stop people from critically thinking? Will you install a version of thinking that has the same smell, the same appearance, the same flavor as critical thinking, but it's like when they say natural ingredients or whatever it is. It's what the hell does that even mean? It's there. These are natural. It's natural thinking, but it's not organic. It's still synthetic. It's still packaged. It's still some nonsense that's not at all from you. It's from a factory. It's been generated in a factory somewhere. And since the system has no concern with time, it can create all of these different factories, and that is the game itself, to get people consumed with the various programs and the various pathways and the various stepping stones that are presented out to the people to act as the controlled opposition, so the people themselves control themselves. The people themselves control the idea of an opposition. And if you have so much fear inside of an individual, they will you don't have to do anything, because the people will do it to themselves. This is what's happening when the complexities of the human experience are being played against themselves. This is what's happening. The complexities of the human experience are being played against themselves. And one version of the complexities of our experience being played against themselves is race. That's just one version of it. That's like one step down. But overall, beyond race is just a subcategory to the idea of power, the idea of authority. The authority of who, of what gives this system the authority to wage war on anybody. Where did the authority come from to create the military-industrial complex, to create the prison-industrial complex? Did it come because these people had the authority vested in them from God, like these old-school kings and queens? No, in the modern days, it comes from people being so dumbed down and separated from their own power that they give the authority and power away to these enslavers, largely because we've been trapped in these fear programmings and all these other mind control programs for so long. And we don't have any other options. In their system, you will always have a lack of options. This is the same way the system keeps technology and releases technology at certain times, because as long as you're salivating at the mouth for the next iPhone, as long as you're salivating at the mouth for the next technological breakthrough, they got you. And you can't go anywhere. You can't move anywhere. So this is what's happening in the so-called truther communities. They have people locked down with the idea, salivating at the mouth at the next information, the next story that's going to drop, the next false flag, the next war, the next Alex Jones piece, the next Stephen Colbert story, the next Trump tweet, the next late night talk show storyline, the next basketball championship, the next gladiator arena, the next whatever it is. You're always in the next. You're never in yourself, and you have no idea what came before you, because largely it doesn't matter. If the system itself says it doesn't matter and acts like it doesn't matter, then the people are just going to copycat that. This is why it's so important to realize the effect that these fake leaders have on people who are not even good followers. See, in order to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower, and it takes a long time to be a good follower. It takes a lot of pride. You're not even, just because you're not a leader doesn't mean you're not. A follower can be a leader. In fact, the best leaders are the best followers because they're listening. Following just means listening. Listening. You have to learn how to listen to yourself, listen to the world, listening to what's actually being said. If you have more experiences in your reality, then you'll be able to listen more. What's happening right now is that we're so bombarded by chaos, distraction, destruction, normalization of all of these, and this just nonsensical interpretation of our reality that we don't even know how to listen to ourselves. And even if we were to listen to ourselves or anybody else, our artificial versions of ourselves get in the way of that listening. So you have another set of ears that are installed in your reality. You have another set of eyes that are installed and conditioned in your reality. You have another voice that's installed in your reality. Like, you speak a certain way if you're going to talk to a politician. Some people, I'm not saying all the time, like, this is one of the things that worked against me in other people's eyes. It didn't work against me for me. But in that system, when I was in the military, I didn't really have the same kind of change in my voice or interaction based upon rank in the military. So I would speak to some of these higher ranking people in a tone that's just like, all right, you're just a regular human being just like me. I'm not going to disrespect you in any sort of way, but I'm not going to turn on this ass-kissing tone that a lot of people live by. A lot of people's entire realities are based upon being an ass kisser, and they do that. And then that's what that is a synthetic voice. If you created a synthetic voice, you have to back that up with a synthetic person that lives, that expresses that voice. So what's happening is that's just one easy example from seeing how soldiers have to be broke down to nothing, and now they create this artificial something and live their entire lives and don't even realize that they've done it. And if you've done it every day for so many months and years, eventually look how long that mind control, how deep that mind control program is going to go. Nobody's going to be able to mind control you more than yourself. So if this is why you have the cool crowd and the Hegelian dialectic locked into this system, is because when you have the cool crowd mentality, which is Hollywood, politics, the athletes, the musicians, and all this other stuff, you created this system where it's uncool to be yourself. It's more cool to be something or somebody else, or like something or somebody else, than it is to be yourself. You've been outcasted just by being you. This can be seen by, I mean, you can expand this all the way into the race agenda. Racism is based upon this. This is what the supremacy program is. And then they turned it into a science with the eugenics program of talking about, well, Negroid head shapes are shaped like this, and that means they're intelligent. And if you go into the Australian Aboriginals, you'll see that they're the dumbest humans on the whole earth. And if you go into the European version of the skull shape, and it's obvious that they're smart. See, what's happening is your definitions of humanity, your definitions of intelligence have been created for you by, like, Alexa, like a robot. And artificial intelligence is giving you your definition of humanity. When you are getting your definitions of humanity from an artificial intelligence, you lack, you are falling short. You will never tap into the true essence of what it means to be a human. So the artificial intelligence of the people who have been saying that they were destined, they had a manifest destiny, they lived by the sword, they lived by technology. They live by conquering, living by all of this. These are the foundations to this system. These are the foundations to the definitions that we hold true today about, what's right and what's wrong. And since people have different definitions and interpretations of the past, the present, and the future, nobody's really on the same page. Everybody's only interpreting their reality from their own little bubble, from their own little perspective. I mean, you could expand that all the way out into realizing that it's always going to be like that. But when you have, like I said, in reference to compositions of music or a drum circle, you can get a whole bunch of people who will always be playing their music to come together and actually make a symphony that is just beautiful. It's never been heard before. And they don't need any music written on any paper or anything. It's only from listening to each other. Drum circles largely start out of nothing. One person shaking a tambourine, one person hitting a cowbell, one person starting on the djembe, whatever it is, it's always going to be somebody stepping out. And it doesn't even have to be amazing. It can just be somebody can actually take one little portion of a shitty drum, of a shitty rhythm, and then start the whole drum circle from the portion of that shitty drum circle or that shitty rhythm that started it off. And then before you know it, the entire drum circle has, in fact, raised the vibration or the consciousness of that original shitty rhythm. But where did it all start? It started from somebody listening and then adding to rather than breaking down. So you can listen and add to, and it'll be for the greater good of the people. Or you can break down and just only like pride yourself. This is what's happening right now. The system is not concerned with creating any equality or balances or anything like that, because there's some stories that this system wants to keep hidden. There are some differences that are part of this reality that are embarrassing, for lack of a better terminology, for certain people. In fact, you can just break it down to the perspective of just being embarrassed for having used this cheap ass magic on people for so long, only for your own greed and power and control. Ultimately, like, the power, greed, and control, that's some childish shit. It's really childish. It's a childish consciousness to live your life at the expense of other people in order to have a fancy car, a nice house, and all that other shit, and just have all this opulent ass living, and then but you're full of nothing. That's the proof of a lower consciousness. I mean, it's only concerned with itself. And eventually you'll get what you ask for. You'll be living by yourself. This is why a lot of these Hollywood movie stars and these actors and musicians, they're fucking miserable, because they're surrounded by people who are just empty and just dead inside and have no kind of essence to who. And it's like it's like eating a fucking meal in a nice ass house forever, but there's no flavor, there's no seasonings, there's no nutrients, there's no minerals, there's nothing in there that triggers you and makes you feel good in any kind of way, because you are so full of all of these artificial fillers and artificial flavorings that you can't taste anymore. You've burned your taste buds. People have had their taste buds of consciousness burned out by this Western so-called civilization. That's the best way I can put it right now. People have burned themselves out right now, and people are only realizing it. But since a lot of people have been locked into trying to interpret their internal reality from an external dictionary or an external perspective, the math doesn't equate, because you're not listening to yourself. You're listening to somebody else's interpretation of yourself. This is what the New Age community is based upon. It's synthesizing the individual, the internal process, the internal expansion of consciousness has been synthesized into the New Age community. This is why you have people short-circuiting in the New Age community when they're feeling like all this connection, and it's all real. It's all very real in a sense. Not the whole community. I'm saying the people who are feeling certain things, like when they learn to meditate after having nothing, they don't even know what that is, or they can feel nature in a certain way, whether it's by crystals or being in nature or whatever it is, coming from nothing and then going into that waiting room of something can be used as an entire world. Some people create that as they build an entire world around themselves called the New Age community. And now that they have a new world, now they create new people to people that world. So that's a good example of how all of these other communities, so-called communities, exist to make us think, act, and feel a certain way in the synthetic versions, with our synthetic ears, our synthetic eyes, our synthetic flavored nodes, and all that other shit. You get locked into thinking that you're critically thinking. That's what's like. It's the waiting room to whatever doorway that you didn't even see before, because the smoke was so thick. The New Age, what happens is that the New Age clears out a lot of that smoke in this smoke and mirrors agenda. But the thing is, you're the one that has to walk through that hall of mirrors in order to get out of that synthetic system. And what happens is that people have walked out of the smoky ass, the self-destructive world of death and destruction on a massive scale and even on an individual scale, and they get into the New Age community. And what happens is that the smoke starts to clear because they start listening. But it's not only about listening. It's also about how you're walking in that path. And are you going to walk into another mirror? Are you going to smash your head? Are you going to blame the mirror? Or are you going to start to figure these things out? So what's happening is that people walk into the Hall of Mirrors with all this smoke going into the New Age community. The smoke clears out of the Hall of Mirrors and people think that they've become enlightened. They think that they're woke. They think that that they've reached some sort of higher consciousness because now they can see a version of themselves in all of these mirrors, but they don't realize that they're still in a Hall of Mirrors. So what's happening right now is before you even get to the New Age community, like me, I was stuck in the Occupy protest, literally smoke and mirrors. People out holding mirrors up for the police officers to see themselves. It's funny, but it's true. It's literally smoke and mirrors. They were throwing flashbang grenades out there and these smoke canisters in order to disperse the protesters. And that's another good example of the system needing you to fight it in order to give it power, for itself to give itself power from your authority. You approve the system to give itself power. You have to sign that. So like going to these protests and falling in their bubble is giving them the authority to lock you down or lock you up, or because you've given them the authority to have some kind of authority over you that doesn't even exist in the first place. So I'll stay on the New Age because that's a good analogy of sharing like how all of these other systems that we see in the world, like social justice warriors, the info wars, New Age communities, veganism and feminism, you can see how the same storyline fits. The smoke and mirror analogy fits in reference to any of these other agendas that are out there, because yes, realizing a lot of the downsides to the meat industry and eating meat for your body and so on and so forth, that's one thing, but it's not all that. And we're all not that simple. Humanity, that's just like people saying, oh, there's no racism doesn't exist, racist doesn't exist, we're just all human. Well, Okay, whatever you want to say, sir, but there's more this place and everybody is so complex. You can't put these simple ass definitions on everybody. You will always fall short, and when you fall short, somebody gets sick. Somebody's not going to fit in that category because we're not meant to fit in that category. Not all people were designed to think, act, and feel this certain way. Some people season their food differently. Some people live their entire lives and don't season shit. And that's fine. They can live with some unseasoned ass realities their whole life. Let them be that way. But don't put your unseasoned ass definitions on my shit, because you will fall short. And that's exactly what's happening with these new age mentalities and these social justice warriors and these. Let me get into that now so I can close this out, because that's like the biggest thing. So I talked about the new age mind control program that acts as like a trap. It's a trap if you stay on that stepping stone. These agendas that are out there. So you have the agenda of the New World Order, the race programming, the LGBT agenda, the New Age agenda, the alien agenda, the CERN agenda, simulation theory agenda, the mainstream pop stars like Beyonce. There's an agenda behind her. There's an agenda behind Will Smith and his YouTube channel. And just as there's an agenda behind an agenda in a sense, like overall, it makes you think, act, and feel on a macro scale a certain way. Your subconscious is being programmed a certain way. Not saying like individually, each and every person, each and every writer on the Colbert Show is, specifically writing down this mind control program. It only works when the people are unaware of it. Same thing with like heliocentrism. Like I said earlier, when people say, well, how is everybody lying? It's not that simple. It's not that simple. It's more complex than that. You have compartmentalized systems where people who spend their entire lives learning how to do one part of a program, and then all of a sudden they come together and they're on a need to know basis. Just like in the military, you have people with secret clearance, top secret clearance, and then mega top secret clearance, super mega awesome top secret clearance, and then all this shit. That's how it's done. You only know what you are told to know in that system. But that's the thing. Once you break the codes of this system, you start realizing things and knowing things that you didn't even know were there. Because you can see with your own eyes. You can hear with your own ears. You can taste with your own mouth. You can feel with your own senses, instead of interpreting or filtering it through something like TYT or InfoWars or capitalism or democracy or the Western so-called civilization or social justice warriors or actors or politicians or whatever it is. Your reality is filtered through something or somebody else. And all these agendas that I've been listing off and all these labels that I've been listing off, these are just filters that are designed to trap you into a particular frame of consciousness that will allow you to eventually, subconsciously, you've been triggered to trick yourself. You've been triggered to condition yourself. So when you're surrounded by all these different versions of conditioning programs, then you've created a monster. A monster, a blind, just a self-destructive and overtly like destructive to other people monster. That's the chaos that gets created when people can't express themselves, because largely the dream within this dream is that they can't express themselves because they don't know themselves. So they still have a desire to express something, and these individuals and groups of people are expressing the something that's from a system of nothing. So yes, you might have gotten good at something because the smoke cleared, but when you're trapped in the InfoWars, TYT, mainstream media, mainstream comedy, late night talk show, when you're trapped in that, they might clear some of the smoke out and turn it into laughter. You're still in a cloud of smoke, but the point is you're also still trapped in a hall of mirrors that has been created by that system. So you're walking around thinking that the way you interpret this information is all that matters. That's not it. It's how you're walking with this information. That's the difference between thinking and critical thinking. The smoke might clear and you might be able to think something, but you're not going to be able to actively engage that thinking, like activate that truth, until you start walking in that hall of mirrors without smacking your face into a wall because it's been put there for you to do that. How many times have we been smacking our heads in the wall of, like, the presidencies? Look at this, is a good example. Like, people waiting every 4 or 8 years for something to change, and it doesn't. I'm not gonna say it doesn't change. I'll say it changes, but it changes for the worse, under the appearance of changing for the better. Just like I said in the Civil Rights Act, you think you got something good, but that's only been planted as something good in reference. In response, in reaction to a system that was horribly fucked up. I mean, they were bombing and lynching people. They had to have come out with some kind of civil rights something. So when that was promoted to the people, people ate it up and they said, oh, well, this is everything. It's not everything. It's just something because you've had nothing for so long. So that something that you have now, based upon the nothing that you had before, is some of the smoke clearing, but still being trapped in that hall of mirrors. So you have the systems I listed off, like Black Lives Matter, obviously a controlled opposition. The New Age community, obviously a controlled opposition. Parts of the Flat Earth community, different truthers and conspiracy. Like, look at I just saw a Prince EA video that was posted like 4 weeks ago, where he was talking about, damn it, what was he talking about? I'll come back to it, but basically, if you look at it, you'll see that. Let me go ahead and just pause this. So the story was, or the video was, the Prince EA alien thing. And I was gonna do a whole video on it, but I guess this is good enough. If you watch it, he basically takes the same premise that Reagan was taking when he was talking about what would happen to humanity if we were faced from an alien aggressor or something like that. How we would be unified if we were, attacked by aliens or something like that. And Prince EA was, coming from that perspective of, we're all the same. You see how that shit's got to be sold to you like that's total bullshit. So much of the things that are going on every single day. 1, 2, 3. Bullshit for you. Bullshit for me. Selling it over and over again. And you believe it. Just imagine all kinds of like really attractive sort of video transitions and, fonts and all kinds of shit. That's what it is. Selling you some old entertainment bullshit. But the main thing is you're being conditioned to think, act, and feel a certain way. So the alien agenda is all through that video, obviously. He's just using it as an idea to expand the definition of humanity from this unseasoned ass definition perspective. And yeah, so the alien agenda, you see what I'm talking about, how all these different styles of mind control are out there. He's just another one of them. But he's on the outskirts. Like I said, he's on his own, at least outwardly doing his own thing from a spoken word perspective. These things need to change, and they're only going to be able to change from us. You, me, us. We. Mind blown, man. Oh, Prince EA, you're like, this shit needs to go viral, man. It's just total bullshit. It's the most shallow shit that's out there, and people don't even know they're being mind controlled at the same time. To put another label on, start thinking about the aliens a certain way, and yeah. Anyway, so I mentioned the LGBT agenda, New Age agenda, alien agenda, New World Order agenda, channelers agendas, simulation theory agendas, like how this affects us, chemtrails. All of these are based upon locking you into the Hegelian dialectic. 3 of the things that I left out, well, I didn't leave them out, I just didn't think to talk about them in those other videos, were social justice warriors, vegans, and the feminism movements that are out there. And these are going to be some good examples to show how you're trapped within a dream within a dream. So for the feminism movement, like I said, if they're promoting it, it's for a reason. It's going to either promote emptiness and chaos or a shallow version of movement, just like the Black Lives Matter movement. In reference to the feminism movement largely is in reaction to the over masculine, over patriarchal perspectives that are thrust into society that are obvious now. Just like back in the Civil Rights Day, it was obvious that it was wrong what was happening to not white people. We were being held out of certain communities, labeled as nigger, pickaninny, and all kinds of shit. People were being lynched, burned, dragged down the street by cars. Their churches were being bombed. Entire communities like Black Wall Street was bombed. All of these things were legal. The system was okaying this, just like the system okays police to just shoot people without any kind of response. They're getting paid leave after they're shooting people, and then the job is done because it gets televised. So the emotional triggering there and the emotional conditioning, like I said earlier, that's all that needs to be. So you have the feminists who are reacting on television like as if Stephen Colbert ran like a Black Lives Matter protest. That's what this feminism movement is. It's empty. It's nothing. There's no seasoning there. There's no realness. There's no organic anything there with the divine feminine. It's all based upon, knitting a pussy hat and wearing a pussy hat and walking around naked and thinking that that's what it means to be empowered. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing, period. That act is in reaction to having been held down in a certain way for so long, but your power doesn't come in reaction to. That's just the stepping stone. It's the doorway to get to your certain power. Your power comes, that's the first step, is to step out of that and then eventually step into a deeper version of yourself. Is a deeper version of yourself putting on a pussy hat and walking around naked and protesting like that? Is that the deeper version of yourself? No, that's the pathway to the deeper version of yourself, because prior to that, you weren't allowed to say or do anything that involved you being able to express yourself. So the biggest expression you can do is celebrate what separates you from the man, which is a vagina, and then celebrate the rest of your body, which also separates you from a man. So it's liberating in that sense, but your expansion of consciousness, your critical thought from a divine feminine perspective isn't about liberating yourself from patriarchal mind control programs. It's from enveloping yourself in the depths of what the divine feminine actually is. Now, are these feminine agenda or these feminine movements, are they giving a shit about that? No. It's all about what will sell, what will be good for social media, or what's loud. Like, I can't remember what that lady's name is, who was behind all these Time's Up movement and all that other stuff. And she's loud, she's strong, she's like masculine strong from a feminine perspective, because largely the feminine energy is strong in its beingness, in its essence, in its presence. It doesn't have to forcefully express its energy of power, because it just leaks out of the feminine being. Whereas men have more externalized strength, like the physical body, and then you like that linear sort of externalized, like the difference between external and internal, yin and yang, light and dark, electric and magnetic. One is very externally strong, whereas internally, it's not to say women are not externally strong, but internally women are stronger than men. So this is how we balance each other out in this whole reality. But none of that is taken into account when you have a synthetic controlled opposition that is taking that natural response to this reality and co-opting it, or turning it into something that is going to eventually be self-destructive. So that's what the feminist movement is all about, is to channel all of that feminine anger and realizations into a masculine interpretation of whatever's going on. And since people haven't done the work and don't, like I said, if your plate's been empty for so long and something gets put on your plate, you're going to eat whatever you get because it looks edible. But 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, what you thought was edible because you didn't have anything on your plate, like fast food or going through a drive-through revolution, 10 years later, 15, 20, 50 years later, those cancers will develop. And that's the game that this system is playing. It's playing for the long run. That's why it's playing the macro storyline in the subconscious reality, but it's consuming your perspective, your focus, your conscious reality with whatever mind control programs that it develops. So just as you have people focusing on the reactionary programs of a out of balance society from the feminist perspective, the same thing's happening with the food. People have been eating garbage for so long, eating all these animals and just toys, basically plastic food, to where when people start to actually give a shit about their bodies and care about their reality. Let me close this real quick. Once they start caring and analyzing it, that emotion is still there. This is why when I said about that Netflix, when you look at Netflix and you look at all those documentaries and all those alien things and like what's that, Food Inc. and all these other What the Health and all this stuff that's out there, it's designed to get people to start thinking, but only up to a certain level. Because like I said, the system needs you to be smarter in order to mind control your future timelines. It needs you to get up to a certain point. If you're not smart enough to be mind controlled for the next mind control program, then you will have more of a tendency to fight that mind control program, and you'll be more aware of how you don't need that nonsense anymore. You never needed it in the first place. So this is why the system needed social media. It needs these late night talk show hosts to be more informed about politics. That's why when people talk about, oh, people are more involved in politics now than they were ever. You know why? Because the system created an entire comedy system around politics. This is what these late night talk shows are. Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, all these people who have their own shows now, that's on purpose. They need you to get smarter, because the smarter you are in a mind control program, the deeper you're going to be able to mind control yourself. The smarter you are, the more deeply you'll be able to mind control yourself. The more informed, you need more information. You can't just have people running around with nothing. That the times of being controlled by nothing and emotions have passed. You need information now. We've been controlled with emotion before. We're still being controlled with emotion now. But now the consciousness of mind control has shifted from like fear and just beliefs, like belief in the American dream and the American way. That's when we used to be mind controlled, but now people are being controlled by information. And in order to maintain that control, you have to maintain the information. This is where social justice warriors come in. Social justice warriors, and keep in mind, like all this stuff is based upon emotion. When I say the term social justice warrior, just think about, just think about what you see when you see that. You see some angry something and yelling and just empty, nothing. Just one focus group. They only focus on one little thing, and then that's it. A social justice warrior is like it's actually a good correlation or a good example for what I was explaining in reference to the mainstream flat earth community. That's basically what the mainstream flat earth community is, basically like the social justice warrior for today's version of cosmology. But is a social justice warrior a real leader, or are they just somebody who just, gets involved on social media and just talks about stuff? Are they really engaging that story into a deeper interpretation of this reality? No. It's locked into one version of reality. So the social justice warrior mind control program is no different than, like I said, what Alex Jones represents. Alex Jones represents a bunch of emotional information, the old mind control program and the new mind control program, emotional information that will lock you down and lock you out of actually getting on any kind of path for a very long time. It's a gauntlet. It's like a carnival with all of the different rides in that carnival. All of them are another version of smoke and mirrors. So you have angry feminists acting in reaction to, but never really activating what it means to be a balanced feminine energy. You have social justice warriors reacting emotionally to information, but never really activating that information to empower themselves outside of the system that they claim to be against or yelling at. You have vegans who are they're projecting their reality onto other people who might not necessarily be the same way they are, but they are empowered in the sense that they're not engaging, they're reacting to the system. So since the system has been demonized very rightfully by the way it treats these animals, anybody who eats meat is now demonized because they're seen as part of a system, and now these vegans are seen as enlightened beings. That's no different than the New Age community looking down on anybody else who's talking about what's happening on the streets as unenlightened or dealing with some bad or low energy. It's the same shit. It's the same kind of effect. Because it's not as simple as just being in a New Age community is going to save the world. It's not as simple as just being a vegan is going to save the world. Not everybody is built like that. Not everybody is like that. Now, rightfully, like I said, the system that farms all of these animals the way they do, obviously that shit needs to be dealt with. But when you go into that, just like flat earth, is that the only thing? No, you have to go to the infrastructure of what allows the intelligence that allows the people to give the authority to the system to enslave these animals. No different than the zoos. Instead of being happy that you're eating food, like in a fast food, like you're eating meat, and then you just accept whatever the system does, the same thing happens within these zoos, like it used to be Marine World or Sea World now, where they have these dolphin and these orca, these killer whales, locked up in these little cages forever. But what do you get out of it? You get entertainment. You get to see the animals. You get to learn about the world. You get to learn about, you see something I've never seen, an orangutan. Ooh, look at that. I've never seen a dolphin. Wow. But you're never looking from the perspective of those animals, though. Now, I don't care how many rescue this and rescue that you want to talk about. That's the whole, then that gets into the interpretation of the whole savior mentality. Who made you the savior of everything? That's what leads into an individual empowering themselves or promoting themselves as some kind of savior. And now you're in another you can see how this stuff loops back on itself, how the smoke and mirrors program constantly restarts. Just imagine like a software program running in the background, and every time you open up something new, it just starts up in that new window, just in another style. But it's the same program. It's the same program that's running and slowing down your computer. It's slowing down your tablet. It's slowing down your phone. It's constantly running. The Western civilization, these orchestrated versions of movement are literally, and I'm gonna end it on this, they're just like an app, a Western so-called civilization app, a colonial civilization, a racist eugenics program app, a modern so-called society app that's running overtime every time you wake up in the morning in your background. You can't see it because it's in your system. It's in and throughout every system, but you have the illusion of free will. You have the illusion of choosing what you're paying attention to by clicking on various on other apps, thinking that you're doing something, never realizing that you're only running on 10% battery life. Your processor speed is at like 10%. And the remaining 90% of your processing and your information, the ability to store this information, you're full of shit, so you can't store anything new. This is why people can't move anywhere, because their hard drives are full of modern bullshit. And you can't fit anything there until you clear out that modern bullshit. But people can't let it go because they think that's intelligence. This is why people can't let go of heliocentrism, because they have nothing else on their hard drives. They have nothing else in their systems. No other software, no other apps, no nothing. The only program that's running is the program that Neil deGrasse Tyson and all these other assholes promote. Those are the programs that are running, and those are the programs that people are priding themselves with. So people priding themselves with InfoWars, people priding themselves with veganism, and people priding themselves with the feminine protests and the New Age movement, Black Lives Matter and Beyonce and all this other bullshit that's out there. It's clogging your systems. It's slowing down your processors. And the only way you're going to be able to do anything outside of that limitation program is if you first clean up your shit. This is why I came down so hard in these last two videos about how much work needs to be done in the human story before you start stepping anywhere into the involving the experience. The experience will become more vibrant once the experiencer clears all of the smoke out of their reality, so they can see. Once they start to realize that they're in a hall of mirrors and stop externalizing all this stuff and start really seeing this stuff from the inside out, so they don't bump their head on all these mirrors that they just arrogantly walk into and then play it off like, oh, I'm not bleeding, I'm not, no, I'm cool, oh, I'm good. It's a joke to the individual, but when you go to the macro scale, it's not a joke. People are still being bombed, people are poisoned, there's still no water, clean water in Flint. The mind control programs are still leading up to so-called black people killing themselves and killing each other on the streets. The wars are still going on. The prescription drugs are still being pumped. The guns are still being put in the cities. The education is still being pumped into these child's minds every single day. And we consume ourselves with what the system tells us to consume our time with. But is that it? Obviously not. For some people it is. But for the people who are starting to realize that it's not about necessarily what's going on. That's just one version, because there's a whole bunch of different what's that are going on. It's how what's going on is going on and why what's going on is going on. Those are two different levels of consciousness. And once you start going into realizing that there's a how and a why, you start to see the intention behind this stuff. And that's when you can not only clear the smoke out and start to see a deeper horizon, but you can start to traverse this hall of mirrors even more so, because you're not externalizing yourself anymore. You have more senses. Since your programs are running on a higher percentage rate, you can feel that mirror before you run into it. You can see that mirror before you run into it. And that will keep you from busting your head wide open, because if you got a hard head like me, like, you're gonna have to bust your head a few times before you get to a space till you can sense things. That's how me and my family grew up. That's just the way it was. But it's not the way it always has to be. That's the thing. You might have a hard head, but once you get to a certain point, you're going to start to wake up, and you're going to realize that knocking your head on everything is just one way of learning. There's other ways of learning. The system doesn't want to tell you that there's other ways of learning. The system wants you to think, act, and feel without any seasoning in your consciousness, unseasoned consciousness. Because you have all those gaps in your reality, and you have all those synthetic, fake ass and expectations on yourself that are largely empty. So you're chaotic in that little 10% that you have with no energy. You're run dry, and you're empty. And you're full of the systems and programs that the system told you to be full of. Basically full of shit. So on that note, thank you for joining me. Thank you for the support. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.